I got. So this presentation is definitely shorter than my others, and it definitely is going to garner conversation. I'll tell you that. So when I do my presentations, I'm coming forth with information that I've researched and I found. All of my research, all of my presentations are always sharing of information. We are all doing our own research and researching in our separate ways, and we're maybe researching in different angles of our families. But my goal is to share something that maybe can help someone else. That's always why I take the notion to share. Okay. So my sessions are titled Breaking Through These Brick Walls, and this is a conversation about Frederick and why I'm looking for ancestors in Maryland. Okay. So what's driving my research? That's going to be one of the bullet points. A tale of three Johnsons. That's another bullet point. And then I will conversate about the ancestors of the GU 272 enslaved. Not a conversation about who was taken to Louisiana. This is about who were their family members, their ancestors, and then connecting the DNA matches between all of the leads that I discover. So, again, this is my motivation for my research. I will always share this. My grandmother, the information she shared with me, the story she shared with me that I set out to prove. The photo on the left is a woman that I discovered while my goal is to look for ancestors, period. Who is related through my grandmother, my maternal line. I want to figure out these people. So the woman on the left is a photo that I found. Astounded that this lady looked so much like my grandmother. My grandmother. This would not have been her mother, her grandmother. This would have been like a third great grandmother or an aunt, third great aunt. So that is something that through researching DNA, looking at names and researching these locations, I was able to find this photo, something I would never have had. So reaching out to the family members that is connected to them in South Carolina to bridge that in that connection. Okay. So again, to the conversation of what drives me. So one of the things my grandmother shared with me was her mother's name. So her mother on the 1900 census said her name was Sasha Lee Cope. She was born 1897 in Alabama. Her father was Peter Cope. Her mother was Para Lee Cope. Her maiden name was Rhodes. So, but then my grandmother says, well, Mama had this long name. Emma Marlilla, Lucina, Lucana, there's a name missing, Luvana, Marlilla, Elizabeth, Sasha Lee, Francis Cope. I started researching 36 years ago now. And at that time, the 1900 census wasn't out. You know, we have to wait for the census. So when the census actually, I was building my information of the family, looking for Elizabeth. But when I saw this Sasha Lee, I knew who she was because my grandmother had told me the oral account of her mother's name. So all of these names to me meant something. Why would your mama give you your mother all of these names? So this is one of the things I'm looking for, the name Lucina, Marlilla, Lucana. These unique names are what I'm now looking for as I'm searching for ancestors. Now, my grandmother's grandfather, her father's line, which is an Anderson, and I later discovered by connecting with other cousins, they also went under the name Wiggum. How weird and how strange is that? So in 1870, James Anderson was living in Barber County, and he says he was born in the District of Columbia in 1818. So at a minimum, I knew that I'm looking for family named Anderson in Maryland. 1818 is when he's born. So his mother is probably born closer to 1700. I'm sorry, so 1800s, 1790s. So I knew that when I got ready, that's what I was going to be looking for in this Maryland area. But then I
Wait,
had a cousin.
Delbert, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm trying to understand. So why are there two of these? I know you said because they may go by a different name. So the name may be different, but
No,
why are there two of these?
I was going to explain that. So then I
Okay,
got
okay,
ready.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I got ready to publish my book. I'm hot on fire. I had a cousin contact me. She was researching this James, this Creasy, this family. She's actually a jazz singer living in I think Europe. So she contacted me on Facebook and she says, I'm trying to do an album cover dedicating this to my ancestors line, but I have James Wiggum, Creasy Wiggum. And I said, where did you get this name Wiggum from? What do you mean Wiggum? And of course, I never would have looked for Wiggums. And so basically, as you can see on the left, James Anderson is identified as white. Everyone in that house is identified as white. But James Wiggum is identified as black. And everyone in that house was identified as black. Another thing you'll notice the location of where they were living. In one place, they were living in Clio, Barber County, and another place, they were living in Clayton, Barber County. So basically, whatever was told to the census taker, they were able to pass for white. How do you do that? I don't care if one person had a conversation or if they got to see the whole family. They were able to pass for white. And even as my grandmother and my aunt talked about the ancestors of this line, they were able to say that, yes, they looked white or they could pass for white or cousins pass for white over time. So, however that is, I just have to take it with a grain of salt. But what this says to me, am I related to Andersons? Am I related to Wickhams? And yes, I am related to both. So digging through this Wickham name was a whole nother resource that I had to go research. So that made me
I'm,
realize
I'm
that
sorry, real quick, Delbert. Can you go back to that slide? I'm trying to understand something, and maybe that's what the other person was asking. How they're both in the exact same census, 1870.
yes, they are
So they're
different.
two different people.
They're the same person identified.
How is it that the same person is in the census twice?
That's my point. They were able to pass for white. However, it
No, no,
was.
no. How are they recorded in the same census twice, is what I'm
They
asking.
must have been. If you notice, they're in different houses. So one house is a little further up and another house is a little further back, further down. When I looked at the dates, I believe they were different dates, maybe. I don't know. I have no idea. But when I researched Wiggum, I was able to see that Creasy, the children that are listed at the very bottom, absolutely were related to me. The Wiggums are related to me. The Andersons are related to me. And I just had to let the records tell me where to look. And was I able to prove that? Yes, I have been.
Get it.
So somehow they went to both houses and were given information by whomever it was that was given the information,
Right.
and they just gave them with slightly different possible spellings and different last name,
Definitely.
surname.
Yeah.
Well, what ended up happening is James Anderson is black, but the Wiggum name, what it in turn was Creasy. Some of her children were actually children of the enslaver, who was Wiggum.
Mm. Okay, okay.
I'd be interested to
Wow.
see which one was first.
Definitely Wiggum was first.
And how many months apart?
Well, they're years apart. So
No,
Wiggum,
no, I mean, but they're both recorded in the 1870
oh,
census.
in the
So
census itself.
when was the census taker at the Wiggum household versus the Anderson household? Which one of those were first?
Yeah, at the end, trust
I
me,
think
I
that's important
researched that.
information.
I put it in my book. I have that at the end. I'll go back to that 1870 census. I'll do that.
And
Yeah.
between the
I want to make sure my computer don't flake out on me with
time at one house and the other, they may have moved also.
I don't know.
Right. And
I don't
was
know
it,
that they moved. I think they were probably, you had the slave quarters and you had the enslavers area where they may have been working. So for whatever it was, I think they ended up just being in two different locations at the time when the census taker came someone. And I think when they probably were closer to the white people, they went under Wiggum. And when they were at Clio, Well, Cleo was the white folks, and then Clayton was probably where the black folks were. But
Yeah, some of this you're guessing, and I think you can find out a lot of this by looking at the actual record because the date of the census will be there, the exact lot locations will be there. You could see what was happening first, who the census taker was, whether there's a different census taker. I think there's a lot of information you might want to just add as you're telling this story that is right now is leaving us with a lot of questions.
I
That
understand.
probably can
I
find
understand.
out.
So let me say, I have done all of that years ago when I was stumbling over just trying to figure out hows and the whys. So I've done that years ago. I looked at the dates. I've Googled who was the census taker. I mean, not Google. I went to the census website to figure out who was the enumerator. So I've done all of that. Um, there is no reason that I can justify why they were able to record themselves twice. What I had to do was to see, do I have DNA connections to people under the Wiggum name? Because Anderson literally migrated to Alabama. I mean, they migrated to another county. So I knew that family entirely. My grandmother said to me that her father wasn't from Bullock. She said her father was from Barber. So her oral account told me not to look at Bullock for her father's information. Then when I discovered Barber, then I started realizing, okay. So what I'm sharing with you guys, I found the black record, but then when my cousin contacted me, then it made me really look at both of these records. So I'll be happy to share that later. That's something I have researched as best as I can. But there are some things with this stuff that I do want to convey. We wasn't there. We don't know why and what. And there's almost nothing we can do to put our finger on that thing other than use our matches to our cousins and our DNA to substantiate it. So for me, that's what I have to go by. And sometimes for some of you, it may be what you have to go by because everything can't be proven. So, but I will show the actual census. Okay. So what I did.
Deborah, this is Donna. I want to say something about the difference in the names. I attended the Truth and Reconciliation in Prince George's on lynching, and it was one of the families or one person name had changed because that he was with someone that was accused and they ended up being lynched and they changed their name
Right.
and they moved somewhere else. So it could be any number of things in that case.
Absolutely.
That he could have wanted to change his identity.
Absolutely. No, I respect and understand. No, I said I respect and understand that. There were no lynchings that I've been able to see that I could research. What happened was I was trying to determine was I related to Wiggums that remained in Barber because this family by 1870 was in Bullock. And without having had DNA when I was looking, I took my test DNA 19 years ago. I just was focusing more on records than DNA because the DNA kept changing. And I didn't know the correlation to the names. So I can't say I'm related to you and I don't know how. I don't know how to ask that question. So since having researched the Barber and so basically what I will tell you what I did to figure that out is I had to research the enslavers' names, the Wiggum enslavers' name, and the Wiggums were actually in Jefferson County, Georgia, with the Hannahs. Eventually, Mr. Wiggum married a Hannah daughter. That Hannah daughter was giving slaves by her father. The father, when he died, distributed the slaves to his sons and his daughters and his grandchildren. So by researching the enslaver is where I was able to see my line with the Wiggum and the Hannah connection. And that made sense of how my ancestor was given to a Wiggum and how they may have taken that name Wiggum. DNA matches to cousins that are more mulatto than my line is how I was able to bridge that. But this is me sharing with you my research approaches and why I end up going into the directions that I do. So I researched the enslavers' family. You're looking at Thomas Hannah. That was the further enslaver. And from Thomas, there was this name Sook, and all of Sook's children are in this pane on the right. And the will said, I bequeath Sook and her family. And that's exactly how he said it. And when I tracked the family, the slaves, and then I looked at those last names and I tracked the last names and locations in my DNA matches, it started to line up. And so with all of this is how I'm able to figure out using DNA and tracking these families, how I'm related in this way is by using both. But I use DNA to point me in the direction of where to look. But at that time, for me, I needed to research the enslavers because I knew I was trying to track a Wiggum name. And that Wiggum name took me to the Hannah name. And from there, I also researched their children. So I just wanted you to be able to understand my approaches in researching the DNA matches to my connections. Okay. This is my pedigree chart, fan chart. On the right is my maternal. On the left is my paternal. And on the right is every one of my maternal matches out of Alabama that I have found through research and records. Having done that, at the close of this year, I submitted Sook and her line, and with all of the records that connects all the way down to me, to the Sons and Daughters of the United Middle Passage, of which I am a member. And with that, I have submitted every one of my maternal matches. So every one of my ancestors on my maternal side, I have submitted to the Sons and Daughters. So I'm just waiting for my certificates or for them to have questions, whatever they may have, or to vet that information. So I generally share this because I'm so out of Alabama. These matches lead to Georgia. These matches, my Alabama connections have led to South Carolina. So people start seeing me posting questions about, hey, are you related to Rogers in Georgia? Anywhere Georgia, Rogers, or a specific place in Georgia. And I can say that because I've looked at these slaves. I've looked at these slaves connected to these families. So I know for a fact who sold who gave who to who, and I see where they're living. And then when I reach out to people and I say, do you have matches here? I'm reaching out to the cousins that I know I have in these groups. So when I put a blanket post out there, I'm pulling information because I already figured out, I know how you're matching. And then when we talk, we vet that together, understanding your tree, those kinds of things. Some people have given me access to their DNA, then I'm able to look at that, and I'm able to look at their trees. So when I'm looking for me, I'm also looking for you. Many people know that I'll call and be like, hey, are you looking, do you have such and such? And that's because I'm always thinking about when I talk to you, who are your matches? What are your names? Where are your locations? And then that kind of thing. So I just wanted you to know where I stand with my research, why I'm not 100% out of Alabama, but pretty much. And I help who I can in the Alabama space and other things like that. But now I'm looking for these ancestors because up to 5 generations is done. Okay. So a tale of 3 Johnsons. We have the concocted Furnace Johnson I've named number 1. A correlation between the Johnson number 1 and Thomas Darnell's slaves, possible. A possible connection between Johnson number 2, who I've identified as Johnson and Beatty of the GU 272 sale, and that connection to Frederick, Maryland. I didn't necessarily mean Frederick, Maryland number 1. He's not necessarily connected to Johnson number 1, but he's connected to Maryland. So I apologize for that typo on the bottom. Okay. So now that I'm out of the Alabama and now I'm trying to find James and his Maryland connection. One minute he said Maryland, another minute he said Virginia. We know lines changed. He could have been talking about his family, parents. I don't know. But now that I'm in Maryland, now I got to do backstory on understanding what was going on in Maryland during this time period. And now these prominent names start popping out. The reason I went to Catoctin Group was I had a cousin in Alabama, in my Alabama group out of Barber. We're trying to figure out how we are related. And he was a member of the Catoctin Group. So when I said, what is Catoctin? I researched it. I looked at the Facebook group. I tried to join. I said, hey, PJ is my cousin. He's in the group. Maybe there's something I need to know about this area. So that's what took me to Catoctin. We don't know where to look. We don't know these projects exist, but we share amongst ourselves to try to further our research. So I said, okay, let me learn who is Catoctin. What is this furnace all about? And so now I started paying attention to these prominent names. Okay. George Washington, and there were more, there were so many more. I'm only listing a high level couple. George Washington was best friends to Thomas Johnson. He was also the first governor of Maryland. So we got the first governor of Maryland, best friends to George Washington. His daughter married into the Ross family, Betsy Ross's family. So many other of those family ties are crossed. Francis and Barton Scott Key, the attorneys for the freedom suits, also lived and were from Frederick, Maryland. The Johnson family's heritage, as I researched, the Johnsons of Frederick actually reared from Calvert and Anne Arundel. Some of the family members moved to Frederick in the early 1700s. Some remained in these other places. So as I'm trying to connect Calvert and Arundel, all these other locations, Johnsons, to Frederick, that information is scant. It's difficult. Some of those families don't know the connection. Some of those families have not made the connection, can't see it in somebody's tree. A great deal what I started understanding, if they weren't prominent, then it may not have been someone that they purposely wanted to highlight. So yeah, some of the connecting these names is challenging and is difficult. So I just wanted to share that I have tried. I may still continue to try, but nonetheless, I have tried to find the connection between just the solid things I'm looking for, But there is a connection, hands down, between Frederick, Calvert, and Arundel enslavers that were Johnson. Carroll family and this possible connection to Frederick and Johnson, number one. So Elizabeth Comer a few times has shared that Charles Carroll sold slaves to the Johnsons. I'm still trying to find that documentation. We met with her. She came to one of my sessions in December, I believe. She shared she wasn't sure where that came from. So I'll circle back with her and ask if you can really help us to figure out that. That would be great because there's a great connection there. If not, then I'm looking at records. Then I'm looking for information. Because that has been said, Charles Carroll is heavily connected to the Anne Arundel, Princess George, that whole area, wherever it is. That's just something I'm having to research. But if he sold slaves from that area to Frederick, then that bridges a connection between those families that may have got lost, but it's not lost. It's documented somewhere. And so hearing that connection based on the conversation from Elizabeth was like, that's something to look into. When I'm ready, I'll look into that. So that was what's pawning the peak of me between 272 Frederick. Darnell's possible connection to Frederick, Maryland, and the Johnson. The Darnell name came from that Princess George area. The Jesuit priest area, they enslaved. They had slaves. And so what I'm highlighting here is a tree I created for the Darnells. Because again, I'm going to create trees of these lines. John Darnell, as early as 1708, was in Princess George, but then he died in Frederick. So we have this family line. I'm not saying John Darnell was a priest. I'm not saying he's totally connected to the Jesuits. I know his family was in some way. I know for a fact the Diggs are connected to the Jesuits as non-Jesuits, having sold slaves, having hired slaves to the Jesuits, all of these political business connections. But John Darnell died in Frederick, and then his son Thomas, over here on the left, Thomas died in Frederick, 1798. So I believe I heard that it's been conveyed that Thomas Darnell had no children, but he had slaves, and he died in Frederick. There's some history that I've learned by going to different groups, especially the GU 272 group that's researching the Jesuit connection with the sale. So I go to these groups to learn, to get a backstory of the areas that I don't live in. Somebody knows some information, so I shouldn't have to start at the bottom. Let me glean what I can glean to help me get a better understanding of where to look. So I tripped over Thomas Darnell looking for Johnsons, and Mr. Baker Johnson was he signed or Roger Johnson. Roger Johnson, as you see gently on the page, he was a signer of the probate record for Thomas Darnell when he died in 1799. So this man had no family, but he had all these slaves. What you see in red are the names of slaves that I thought I gleaned in Baker Johnson's will when he died. So now I'm not saying these are the same slaves. I am saying I need to research this. In 1799, when Thomas Darnell died, Sook was, Sook was maybe 20. I'm just outlining her age here, but I think she was older when Baker died in 1815. But to the right is Baker's will in 1800. When he wrote his will in 1809, it was executed 1811. I'm chasing correlation relationships between these enslavers and the slaves. Because again, if you remember, my Sook was over there in Georgia, right? I don't know if there's a connection. And then one of the Hannah's records, I saw the name Beatty. And I'm like, wait a minute, this name Beatty, but that came from over here in Maryland. So I have to track the Beatty name of Georgia to see if there is a relationship between that family and over here in Maryland, so that I can try to understand, could he have been a slave sailor involved in the selling of slaves out of Maryland to another place? So at the end of the day, my brain, yes, I might have a bunch of things on my to-do list, but that is my commitment to me finding my ancestors. And the approach I'm taking, as you saw with the fact that I've already found my maternal line, has worked for me. But it is a strategic, and it is with a methodology that I'm vetting, but it is panning out results for me. So Johnson, number 3, and the Key Ross in the GU 272 in the connection to Frederick. So Henry Johnson, if most of you here know, he was involved in purchasing the slaves from Georgetown, selling them to Louisiana. So now I'm trying to figure out what's this connection to the purchaser of the slaves to Louisiana to Frederick. And so I find that Henry Johnson was actually born in Tennessee. Then later it goes down. He was the governor of Louisiana. Some people know that. But then I'm like, okay, so let me figure out who is he and who is his family. So I found on WikiTree, someone posted Henry Johnson, wife, her name was Elizabeth Rousby Key Johnson. Now I know I've been tripping over the name Key. And then they married in Washington, D.C. So this man from Tennessee married a woman out of Washington, D.C. I said, okay, let me just keep looking. Elizabeth Rousby Key, her father She was the daughter of Philip Barton Key and Annie Platter Key. Okay, I remember Philip Barton. Is that the same Philip Barton involved with the freedom trials, involved with helping the slaves try to get their freedom in Maryland and whatever other areas? Let me go look. So Anne Arnold Ross Key, she was the wife of Francis Key. And so then as I go further up, then now we see John Ross Key, Francis Scott Key. They were born, Francis Scott is, John Ross is Francis Scott's father. Well, Francis Scott Key was born in Frederick. His father died and mother died in Frederick. Philip Barton was born in Washington. But now, if we can recall, I think I have that. Yes, so Philip Barton Key and Francis Scott Key were involved with the freedom trial of the slaves, trying to get their freedom and be manumitted. So that's tied to the Queens, the Darnells, all these other names that people know that were involved with getting their freedom, but they were the ancestors to many of the 272 cell, GU 272 cell. So what I was looking for was a connection. The deepness of that connection needs to be researched, needs to be vetted. But to be told there is no connection, and I'm like, there has to be. And I just wanted to be able to see, was there a connection? The reason for that was, I have said a few times, the slaves of Frederick came from somewhere. Yes, it's my thought that many of them, some of them may have come from the Jesuit area. All of that is to be researched. And this was just sharing how they represented the Queens and all of the other Jesuit-related connections over there in Southern Maryland. So, and this is just a page that I made pertaining to their connection. My connection to Frederick and the research that I'm doing to figure this out. I think I moved that. So I actually have a maternal and a paternal connection to Frederick. The paternal leads to Barbados and or Jamaica. So I posted a link in the Facebook group saying, oh my goodness, I actually found a connection that I have in Frederick, and that person had the name Thomas Johnson. So this is the person I'm calling Johnson number 3. And all the work that I'm trying to figure out, he was born in 1810. He died in 1886. So that at least takes me to an 1870 census, researching who was his enslaver. So this person had stopped there. My goal is to use records and information to help me to figure out what is this Thompson T's connection. I've started doing that with the tree. I started doing that with records, that kind of thing. But in order for me to figure out my DNA matches, I have to do the work, the records and research work. My maternal match, well, that's taking me to England. Down here it says my European maternal match. He's actually born in Frederick, died in Frederick, but we're talking about 1740. Yes, I have to figure this out. So I'm researching these areas and looking for information to try to help me to understand these families and their connection to the areas, and how am I related to you, through who and where. Some of the things that I will be doing next is looking at deeds and looking at slaves that were brought into Frederick from somewhere else. So this is work. Earlier today, Elizabeth Comer shared in a meeting that on the Catoctin website, they put a great deal of Mr. Smith's work. I've gotten some of that information already. I'm researching that information so that I can read and understand the names that I need to understand and their possible connection to me. I'm not necessarily researching everybody, but I need to understand the patterns these people had. We have here, my goodness, in the name Nolan, I'm reading, it's saying late of Loudoun County, Virginia. So depending on the date, 1796 might have been Virginia, possibly could have changed to Maryland. Yes, I have to look at land records. Yes, I have to know the date when boundary lines were changed or created. But this is all the work that it entails to figure this stuff out. So I will be trying to figure out about the slaves who were brought into Frederick. Then there are slaves who were manumitted living in Frederick, many other places. But as for Frederick, if they were manumitted, there were some who were not free. This says there were some who may have been freed. I have seen records where it says set them free after 4 years, manumit them after 10 years. And so my belief is they are servants at that point. Do they actually manumit them? That's something that a person has to trace that line to figure that out. But yes, if they were free people living in Frederick, why were they free? Did they buy their freedom? Did they earn their freedom from those freedom trials that occurred out of Frederick? So this is the information that I gleaned that leads me to come up with the theories that I can research to try to vet it with clarity. And then there is a list of all the slaves that were in Frederick by name, who was the person who owned them, who was the person who sold them. These are the same records that are on the Catoctin website that I'm working with to try to figure this out. So now these records are on the Catoctin website, and so we just have to do the work to figure it out. But they have made it publicly available. Sometimes we just don't have the time to look at all of this stuff. So what one person does, what another person does, when I say let's come together and let's research, that's all I'm trying to say. Is if I do my part and you do your part, man, we can bust through this. We can get a better understanding of our connections by working together. So breaking through the brick walls with the GU 272, descendants and their ancestors. The devil is in the details, but we must look at the big picture. So what I'm showing right now is going to be a conversation about that I felt I needed to share. And it's just pertaining to the indentured servants. They were free, and the slaveholders, the enslavers, or the person who hired them. And this is going to be about the slaves that came here as free people of color, who thought they would only work for 7 years and gain their freedom. And this is not all, this is some. So with these names, I'm not saying this is about these families, but this example is, I'm just sharing with you an example. So in the next example, what I'm saying is, let's say hypothetically, number 2 is the female, number 1 is the enslaver. Well, he decided to have children with have sex with the slave and have children. So all the numbers underneath there, hypothetically, are the children they have together. Then he goes off with his wife and he decides to build his own family because the slaves are not, quote unquote, his family. They are his property. So now he has all these children on the left in red, and she has her children on the right in blue. Then he decides, well, I'm going to sell off some of her slaves, which were his children and hers. And that subset of slaves was sent to Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, other areas. And this is going to probably, most likely, what I'm speaking of is this early 1700 to 1800, very early 1800 time period. So now we have a whole subset of families separated from the family to a whole nother location. And on the right, what I'm sharing is Well, the slaves that stayed in that one area, they stayed there the entire time. They never left. So they stayed there through 1800. They stayed there through 1900. They may have stayed there post 1900. Well, they're going to have a lot of high centimorgans. This is not endogamy. We did not set out to purposely have families with our relatives. But when, per se, when we get separated or we lose track of who our family are, I needed to research what is the technical term for that, because I didn't believe it was endogamy. We didn't purposely try to do that. So it's a term called consanguinity. That's it, consanguinity. And what I gleaned that as, families were separated, still related, but in time they stayed in the same place. They lost track of how they related to one another. And so they build high relationships to each other. Yes, on both sides. Sometimes. But the group that left, so the bottom is my group C, that, they were the ones that were sent away. And so they didn't get they didn't stay in that same place. But then when they went to Alabama, they stayed there for a couple hundred years. Or the Georgia group stayed there for a couple hundred years. So the migration could have helped, but then we stayed in the same place. And then some of our family over time migrated to where those families were without knowing. But at the end of the day, A plus B plus C equals a family. And this is me just giving a gentle interpretation of what I believe is what occurred with our family lines. And the challenges that those of us who were removed, and I'm not saying you guys don't have family that was ever not removed, but I am speaking to that example. If the family got removed and then they stayed in one place, over time they believe, hey, my family was from over here, but you're from over there, we can connect. We still don't realize, without having done a DNA test, we may in fact be related. So I just wanted to share my interpretation of this. There is a technical term, consanguinity. So, food for thought. If the enslaved ancestor had children but no spouse, so this is going to be that place where we see slaves, but there's no parents listed. We see a slave mother, but there is no father listed. That don't negate that there's family to be researched. So the mate could have been living on the same plantation, just not recorded as the spouse or the mate to the mother. Many times they did not record the men to be the father of families. Many times they did. That's a blessing. Now we know this is a full family. They could have been living close by, but on a different plantation, or just passing through the area with the enslaver. Like we saw in Roots. He was just passing through for a short time, got with Kizzy, and in the story, Kizzy didn't have a child on TV. I haven't read the book. But if she had a child, that man was gone. Children would be recorded as Black, but many times those children later, or even during that time period, they took the last name of who the mother felt was the father. For me, that's an amazing indication of maybe let me go look here. Because now I have somewhere to be looking. If the children were mulatto, then the father could be the slaveholder, overseer, the slave manager, somebody just passing by to have a tryst. So it just makes the work that needs to be done complex, but it absolutely does not make it impossible. And for me, I think I just love that challenge. That's just how I'm wired, me. So the connection between GU 272 and Frederick. So what I'm sharing here, why am I over here talking about the GU 272 project? Like Catoctin, Somebody said to me, hey, are you related to GU 272? I said, what? I was in one project. Someone asked me that question. I don't even know what that is. So now I'm trying to figure out, what is that? Who are these people? What are they trying to do? But when I searched for Georgetown in my DNA and DNA matches based on the name, me, my daughter, my brother, my husband have a match to the same person in the tree. Just to the same person, JH. So I'm like, wait a minute, I got a match. Oh my goodness. Let me now go investigate what is this and why do I have this match? What does this mean to me? So I wanted to share that because, people are like, why are you all over the place? You over here and you over there. I let DNA tell me where to look. Then I go research there. Without DNA, I promise you, I would have finished my fifth ancestors and didn't have a clue where to look. I would have looked at what they said on the census. That would have been my point of reference. What it meant to me, I don't know. But James told me where he thought he was born, Washington, D.C. I literally would have went to Washington. So if they said it in the census, that's where I would have looked. But now that we have these projects and people are sharing amongst one another and with each other, the goal of it is to try to help us to figure out the maze that is our lives. Okay. So for GU 272, what I needed to do, like I did with the enslavers, what's your backstory? Who are you? What are these names in these families? So there's a website where you get to see all of the families' names. They've separated them in groups. But one thing they did not do is they don't tell you who their ancestors were. This is strictly the families who were removed. Did they stay behind? Did they run away? Or did they go? That is it. And this isn't enough for me because my ancestor was born 1818. So if I'm to figure out how I'm connected to anybody, I'm going to need to look for the ancestors. So what you see in the images above are the places and the books and the information that I start to read, not to exclude the downloads that have been provided by websites like the Society Catoctin's website is providing us resources of information that we can look at and we can use. So all of this is information that helps us to figure out this complex story. It was interesting. I saw on this website, everything in red here were all of the Jesuit locations who sold slaves. I mean, where that were removed a part of the cell. But then I was like, what are these other places? Oh, there were other places that were not a part of the sale. So those are going to be the people who remained in Maryland, stayed behind, and how come many people are related to Maryland because they remain behind. And this is a conversation of, as I'm researching in the information that I find, this is a whole story about a man who was going to be sold to Georgia in 1829. I think it was his family was going to be sold, but something happened and the family got to stay because of whatever is read there. The price that was paid for Stephen was intended to cover a debt necessarily incurred to stop the wife and children of one of our married men from being sent to Georgia. Without this kind of information, we don't know where our families went, where to look. And this is information that I am taking, investing my time to look and to try to figure out. So one of the things I've gleaned, I'm actually combining all of that information, combining it into a spreadsheet of ancestors with those who were in the sale, because it is absolutely the only way to figure out how in the heck are we related. It's been shared, someone shared that their husband was related to 10 people in the sale. Who? How? And without understanding the ancestral component, we won't understand. Now, they may know. If you're from Maryland, you know. But there are so many of you who are on this session. There's so many people who know they're related but don't know how. How many times have we heard that? No, I'm related, don't know how. Me and Emily. Emily knows she's related, don't know how. Like me, all the people I shared, trying to figure out how. So my investment in this is let me figure out the how. So one of the things I'm showing you gently is just some of the things I'm learning, right? So in the group that was identified, there was an Isaac. Isaac's son was Patrick. I don't think Isaac had a wife, but Isaac's son is Patrick. Patrick's child is Frank. They are identified as group 1. Hawkins group went to Louisiana. Now, again, some people ran away. There could be families that remained behind. That's in what I'm tracking. Yeah, I wrote, who is the mother? She could be a whole nother surname that brings in the DNA for this family that needs to be researched and vetted. Then there is this Winberry Blacklock group 4. Nellie and Dick had a daughter named Letty. They became group 4. Went to Louisiana, some remained behind. Well, then Nellie's daughter, Nellie and Dick's daughter, Letty, married Patrick, Isaac's son. They had Frank. Those group 1 plus group 4 made group 1 and 4 for Frank. Okay. Some stayed in Louisiana, some went to Louisiana, some stayed behind. Then there's Nace. Nace had a daughter named Bibi Ann Butler. Now the Butler name comes into play, group 27. So that brings group 27. But I said, who was her mother? But okay. Then there's this Mahoney, group 30. Harry and Anna Mahoney had Bibiana Butler. What's Anna's maiden name? Anna married Harry, but they didn't identify what name is she associated with. When Harry meets Anna, they have Bibiana. Then Nace Butler connects with Bibiana, marries Bibiana. They have Bibi Ann Butler. Bibi Ann Butler marries Frank Hawkins. So the complexities of our lines without knowing the ancestral piece gets lost. Yes, many people could say, oh, I'm related to them and I'm related to them. I'm that person, want to know how. My grandmother and my aunt used to always say, that's your cousin, that's your cousin, that's your cousin. It used to drive me crazy. How? How is these people related to me? And I think I took that same passion for trying to figure out my grandmother's siblings and family, and I bring that wherever I go, because my question is how? And yes, I might not be related to this family. Somewhere down the road, it will be a blessing to somebody, but I will find my family. If I got to do all of this to find one, that's my commitment. So again, let's remember, let's level set. I started this part of this journey, other than my grandmother's grandfather. Sasha Lee was named Lucina. As I started looking at these records, I noticed that there's a family Greenleaf. Joseph Greenleaf had children who took the name Green. I don't know why. I'm going to try to figure this out. But Esther, the daughter, in one record that was recorded, the name was crossed out, Lucina. It was written Lucina. Sal was stricken out. Don't know why. Need to further look into that. But when she went to Louisiana, her name was Esther Lucinda Green. But when she had children in Louisiana, she named her daughter Anne Lucina. Am I related to Greens? Yes. Do I have Greens in Louisiana? Yes. Now I need to research, dig. Is this my Lucina? I'm still trying to figure that out. I am, without a shadow of a doubt, not saying it is. But now I have a better lead that I can put my finger on. And with all this work that I'm doing, if for nothing else but to find this, for me, it was worth it. This is just showing a whole nother name. When we start seeing names, then I go Google. I go and do a DNA search. Do I have the relations to queens? Yes. Do I have relations to Verretts? Why would I? Yes. Don't know. But it needs to be researched and it needs to be vetted. So Casimir Verrett married Nancy Queen, who was born 1819 in Maryland. This is what I have to figure out. But my approach is to know the information. It's not less is more. It's more is best. Because the more information that I can glean, the better I can make a more conscious decision in a focused research. Okay. Summary. My family lines and why I'm researching and triangulating them using DNA and research. So I've talked about Emma. I've talked about James in the District of Columbia or possibly Virginia. I needed to add this because we know, hopefully, prayerfully, we know DNA is distributed randomly. What that means is what my DNA has, my brother's, what I'm missing, my brother may have. So you always hear the more family members you have to be able to triangulate the matches, the better. So someone will research me and won't see my name at all. But maybe they will find me through my daughter's maternal matches, or maybe they will find me through my brother's matches. And DNA and Ancestry, now they're about to get rid of 6 centimorgans or less, unless you make a comment or you add them to a group. I did finally read that. So I will make sure for my 6 centimorgans and less, I do something so I don't lose them. But with lower centimorgans, we won't see them at all anymore. What does that mean? We're not related. My prayer was that slide I had earlier, hands down. My theory is that the disconnection of the family is why I may be less compared to the fact that my family didn't remain in Maryland. Doesn't negate the relationship. Yeah, I think I talked about that. My queen, Proctor, Green. These are some of my ancestral DNA matches that I can see. The top 2 are me. The bottom one is my brother. I'm learning to start using my oldest male cousins who took a test and try to bridge. Some people catch more people that I might not see with me and my brother, and even my daughter start using her DNA matches. This is that whole Verret. So that is it, y'all. Thank you for appeasing me. Oh, I will quickly do my best to, I'll take questions, but I'll go to my census records you guys were asking me about. Feedback, questions.
Awesome presentation. I'm mad I missed it, but I watched the recording.
That's me.
I will say that you don't even have to move that far away, because generationally, growing up in the Texas area for some of my younger years, we didn't get out and about and really, because by then my grandfather's family had left the country and started moving into the cities in the 1920s. And so where they were situated, they were in between San Antonio and Austin. And so they started to separate. By the next 10 years, wherever work went, people moved on further upward within the Texas area. And I say that to bring this to when I did my DNA. When my mother had lived in the Dallas area, we didn't know any family there. And then after taking my DNA test, after my mother had passed, to find that we had family all over the place. And some of my close cousins, where we share, our grandparents were siblings, there were 3 different branches living in that area that we never knew about during that time when I spent time in the Dallas area. And then I lived 20 years in San Antonio, where the other part of the branch went. And at that time, I really didn't have a clue and didn't know anybody. And I have been back since I moved to Maryland after finding DNA relatives again. My grandfather's siblings' descendants, they were all over San Antonio, and that was the opportunities I missed to know family, but I didn't have a clue they were even there, and I lived there for 20 years. So it doesn't even have to go from out of state. It can happen within the state of in some cases poor, nobody really focusing in on the the family information. Not a lot was shared, not with me as a kid. And in asking my aunts, they didn't have a lot of information. Not even on my grandmother's side, who left Louisiana in the 1930s and married my grandfather, and who lived in Texas. And so she never went back home other to visit. And so yes, all of that makes sense. The migration of people and not knowing who their family, even to this day, is crazy. So it's very, very logical.
Yeah, thank you. So this is that census record. July 15th, they were living in Clayton. I do believe one area was more where the slaves were, one area was more where the enslaver was living. Because many times, especially in Alabama, they did not live directly where the slaves were living. They were on what's considered the suburbs, the outskirts. Bullitt County was created after emancipation, and as I read the history of Bullitt, because a great deal of them didn't want to travel into Union Springs, which is in Bullitt, to go grocery shopping, so they created Indian Creek, or they created a whole different township so that they didn't have to travel into where a great deal of the slaves were living. So understanding the locale and the behavior of that location and their slaves kind of makes sense. Definitely one state does something different compared to another. So this is July 15th, and this is August 25th. So these are the two different dates when these were recorded. And black. And here, as you can see, they were all recorded as
okay. Quick
top down
question.
white.
This is you said August, right? So this
Yeah.
is less than a
Just
month
within a month.
later.
Wait a minute, don't say nothing, Carla. Hold on. Let me see. Okay, go ahead. So it's a month. So the other one was July 15th, I think, and this is August 25th.
August 25th. So about a little more than a month later, they're white.
Same names.
I mean, so wait, go. So wait, which one was first? The black one, July 15th was
July 15th, the white one.
July 15th, they were black.
Yes, July 15th.
And then later, under Anderson, so they're Wiggums and they're black on July 15th. And then they're easy. That's fascinating.
Resources, which is what I didn't want to. It doesn't like for me to switch between screens and scroll with everything else I have open. So if it shuts down, I can only apologize. So let's quickly get these questions out. But yes, absolutely. It was fascinating to me. You
have got to dig into this. I would say this is the thing, because this is crazy. This is the thing you really need to find the story around this. This is insane. Why a month later they're white and in this other location they have moved?
They're in different locations. They're in
different locations, and they've turned white and they have moved. Yep. And it's a little more than a month later. I would be like freaking out trying to get to the bottom of that story. And there's a subtle difference in some of their ages. I mean, not enough to make it different people, but still, this is crazy. That is really wild. I I'd be obsessed with trying to figure that out.
I was a few years ago during COVID.
Until I get the answer. I mean, I would, oh my God, wow.
Well,
And so what happened in the 189, I mean, unfortunately 1880 census? I'm like, what do you have
So in
after that? Are they
1870, they moved to Bullitt County, where his family more was.
and they remained Andersons?
Yes.
So you lose your Wiggums.
I lost sight of the name Wiggum, and there were some Wiggums, but I didn't know nothing about them people. 'Cause I was just tracing Andersons and all the cousins and the relationships I had, and I went to Alabama.
Right. So they remain Andersons and they remain white?
No, they were black.
Oh, wait, go scroll up.
Since going forward, they were black.
Oh, so they were black. Oh, they were black as Wiggums and Andersons. Oh, okay. I see that.
Right. And then what happened was this cousin who contacted me, Abram, who you see here. So if you see, Abram was one of the older children. So of course, there had to be more children. There's 20 years difference between the two, but I had to go with Abram. So as I started looking at Abram, Annis, then I got DNA matches. Well, one of my DNA matches was taken to Choctaw, Alabama, and they were Wiggums.
Oh, how far is this place, this township 9 or whatever it is, from township 8? This is 8
Township.
from township 9.
It's definitely a distance. It's definitely a distance. Child, go Google it because I'm telling you, my computer will shut down.
Oh, okay.
But
So,
I
like, what were they running from? And I'm like, yeah. And then I'd want to know more about these Andersons, in subsequent censuses. And
so the way I wrote the story, based on what I could glean in the research that I could find, I honestly believe when they were in one location, they were able to say, this is our name. And then when the sister taker came, like my grandmother's father, he literally married a lot of 6 times, bought 7 marriage licenses. He would change his dates of his age. So sometimes you just throw the census people off per se.
yeah.
We know. But when I got that DNA match to Wiggum, my world changed. And when I started searching for Wiggums, my world changed. And now I only was looking for Wiggums and Barber, but I didn't know what to do with them until I researched the enslaver and started seeing how Mr. Wiggum bought slaves from Hannah.
So
they're really Wiggums. They're Hannahs.
So I missed something. So because I thought at one time they were white.
They were recorded white, but what happened was some of her
white.
Where were they recorded white?
In 1870, on that 1870 census.
Wait, let me see that. I'm sorry. Is it going to tax your system too much?
Because my computer over here is flaking.
To open that,
I don't have to see it, but
under Wiggum they were black. I know, but so you're saying under Anderson they were white?
I thought that was what I heard in the beginning, and I'm just
that's what I thought I heard, but I'm seeing them black as Wiggum. I remember noting that they were black.
Right. And then in Anderson, they were white. But for me,
Anderson, they were white.
Yeah.
And Anderson was second, so they remained white.
He wasn't recorded at all. No, I'm sorry, 1880. By 1880, he either left. I have a suspicion that he may have left the family to go find his family in DC, or he died. So he's not recorded at all in 1880.
Okay.
And Creasy gets to live out her name. But now, one other thing I will tell you guys is, my family was a part of Creasy, Abram, and Annis. I believe it was Annis. The 3 of them were a part of a movement that was trying to get reparations for slaves. And that was how so when my cousin contacted me saying she was a Wiggum, I said, how are you related to me? So she sent me an article that was published in the Alabama Archives journal. And what that recording was that people from people from around Montgomery, Alabama were coming to Montgomery to meet. Hold on. The people that were involved with the ex-slave reparations that was started by Mary Frances Berry, Callie House, in the struggle for ex-slave reparations. So I had to go buy a book and I had to go research information to understand what was this movement. But what they did is they asked the people, what's your name? How old are you? And who was your former enslaver? and they said their enslaver was Joseph Wiggum.
Mm.
So
I
regardless
wonder-
of how things got recorded, I have to let my people tell me what my people need to tell me. Then I let the DNA substantiate that.
Mhm.
Deborah, when you have chance, can you give me the name of that book? Because I have my paternal grandparents are buried. I'd be interested in looking at that book.
She was the writer, but I will. So
Well,
it was the book title, My Face is Black is True. And the author was Mary Frances Berry. And the records for Nara, supposedly, were all online, and they were also on Ancestry. But then I recently looked at it a couple weeks ago. They are now online, but their applications are not.
Hmm.
And
I'm
so
wondering if they were, advocating for reparations, if they were targeted and then had to
Mm.
absolutely.
or some such thing like that. These people were running from something.
No,
That's
no. In 1870, so this reparations movement didn't begin until 1868, until 1880, 1888, something like that. But the movement started somewhere else, and then they were asking people if they wanted to try to get what I call Social Security. They wanted to try to get reparations or pensions, like the soldiers. Then they had to submit dues, and what the government said is you're using the mail to fraud people, and that's how they were able to get rid of the organization in 1920. But from 1880s to 1920 is when the organization was going on. I don't know how long my family was trying to be a part of that movement until I could see their names written in records or an application, but they did record themselves in this meeting that was held in Montgomery. And, all we can do is glean what we can do.
Black Americans have always been more American than white Americans.
All right, Miss, thank you for coming, honey. So, but yeah, so the next thing I share will be straight names in records, connections. Over my journey, what I've been trying to do is share how to use the tools. The next thing I was sharing was, okay, now that we're using the tools, where do we need to look? Where's the records? Now that I do have some of the records, now my goal is going to be use the records to connect them to the dots of the people. Thank you. Yes. And then figure out the movement between these locations and places. I am trying to figure out what happened to Sook. I have now.
Memories of Black experience.
So thank you. I don't, if there aren't any other questions, feedback.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I share one little thing with you? Because I'm not sure if you have this. You know what? Maybe easier if I share my screen, if I can.
No, you taxing me.
This, because you were showing the like Nace Butler and whatever. I was just gonna say you don't have to like recreate the trees for those people because on the GU 272 American Ancestors Project, they have them for everybody. So like you don't have to figure out again how Nason and the Hawkins and the Butlers and all those people are connected because all of this is here already.
But what
So you
happened
see
was,
Frank Hawkins and Bibi Ann Butler going
right.
back up to Nace Butler, Bibi Ann Mahoney, all of those things. So you could go into the website and then go to the family group's trees
Yes.
and get whatever information is available on any of them. Some of these things, you're right, that just aren't known. Like we don't know some maiden names of some of these people. As much work as tons of researchers and genealogists have done, some of that stuff isn't recorded and you just don't know yet.
But let me tell you, stay there, scroll over, stay right there. Well, not Adelphi, Alexis and Anne. So one of the I will tell you what I'm doing in a spreadsheet. Anne has a whole family. A lot of them are sub-families of other families, even though they were given a separate group number. So number one, they're not, so you would have to go to Anne to see the connection. But what I was trying to make sure that I could discern was who's her parents and who were the children and the interrelationship between between the family, right? But beyond past this, what's the ancestors they're connected to? And that's the
That's how
information.
you can do by looking at the whole tree. So you can see how they go up to these
No,
people.
you're not
This is
understanding.
as far back as they get with Nace and
For
Bibiana.
some, for some. But
Yeah.
then I am seeing for some others that possibly they have documented in records. So because this is only focused on the sale.
Oh,
People
yes, that's right. These are the people involved in that particular sale, not the wider issue of Jesuit enslavement.
Right. This is only the sale. I'm talking about 1798. Who was everybody? Who was born? Where were they living? So that we can look at the possibility of the other family connections and relationships. Because again, my James was born 1818. So I got to go up that tree to figure out who's his family, where's his connection, where's his ties. The green line had the Lucina name. So now I need to bridge my connections to Greens and Greenfields so that I can garner, am I actually related to her based on what my grandmother said? But how does that drill down into me? So,
But they focus on the people in the sale, but they do include other people who may not have been sold if they connect to these people.
right. If they were there and then they didn't get sold, probably in 1838, or
Right.
they were doing an inventory.
If they connect to the folks, then they're in there. They're in
Yes,
the person's tree. You know what I mean?
yes. So I've seen that, and actually they have a PDF file that visually gives me that outline with births and dates and marriage births and dates and little things like that. But what I was trying to figure out is how it's overlapping with other people. Man, you have a man married, two sisters had children.
Mhm.
You had someone married 4 times when they went to Louisiana. So it's little things like that that we kind of need to be able to understand so that we can figure out this is where I may connect.
Right,
But
right. Yeah, because once they get down there, a lot of those trees aren't, and those people
no,
may not be in the trees. But yes, the ones that are in Maryland and all of, siblings, all the siblings that they know and ancestors that they know, and yeah, that they're in the tree. But yes, that's how you actually do connect, by finding your person first and then figuring out the
and like
rest. I
age
was
for
just saying you don't have to
related
read
to
through it.
age. And one part, what I'll tell you, like I wasn't expecting to see Lucina, but I
Mhm.
happened to see, and I've been looking for that name. I will research ancestry. I will research different places looking for a Lucina, Marlilla, the uniqueness of these names. But then I had but once I saw the Lucina name, okay, let me research this further. So it's about me being able to find my connections. I wasn't looking for a maternal match that way because that's my grandmother's maternal line. I'm trying to connect my grandmother's paternal line, but then in Frederick, I have a paternal match. So we don't know where our matches are going to come from, but I have to let the DNA guide me. Then I'm looking for the records to substantiate it.
Right.
So,
Okay.
but thank you
Well,
guys.
one other way is, and I'm sure I'm guessing you've done it, is you did the shared matches with your GU match. Was it JH? Was it?
I can honestly say I have not.
Oh, girl, you got to do that. That's going to give you a lot of information. That will reveal some things to figure out who else you're matching with JH, and then see, because
Oh,
that's a hill, I believe.
that's a beautiful thing. Thank you for that. See, I
Yeah.
don't say. Thank you for that. But I definitely, it's frustrating. I had a paternal match, and then when I did shared matches with that one, it went to maternal.
Oh, the child. Yeah. Well, that's going to happen.
What?
It's a mess.
What? So my lines completely crossed. Okay.
Mhm.
So, it's just one of those things, how, what? Because before you could take this to someone and say, here it is, they need to see. And it's frustrating where people, for the sons and daughters of the SAR, the SAR, what is it? The sons and daughters of the American Revolution. So
Mhm.
the DSAR and the daughters of the American Revolution, they say we can't use DNA.
Yeah, they need
So we
records.
have to use records. So to
Right.
tell me I can't go look, okay, well then I'm gonna look for every record I can find. But I'll be honest with you, I've been doing records. Ask Emily. Emily started looking at DNA. What was it, Emily? Like 8 years ago. And I said, you go run and do that. I'm gonna look at records. I transcribed the entire county of Pike County, Alabama. Entire probate deeds. And now I didn't have a clue what the names meant. I was just looking for family. And eventually I found one of my lines that eventually connected to Emily. And then later, as I started researching, following my DNA matches, I connected my South Carolina, Orangeburg, South Carolina to Georgia, from Wanamaker's to Rogers, from Rogers to a whole nother name in Alabama. If we don't do this, we're never going to figure out matches. But now I understand how I'm related to all these people through these names. So I thank you. I thank you guys for appeasing me. It is my prayer that this is helpful to you. But always remember, do know when I'm researching me, I'm thinking of you. I really am. Donald knows I've hit him up and we've traversed a few of our lines now. I'm constantly trying to torture Emily because she's stomping over every name I got in my DNA. Kathy Lynn, I'm forever trying to figure her out. But now I figured out my Orangeburg, Kathy, Orangeburg, South Carolina. But we know there's some Earls that's on my paternal side. Thompson's is my paternal side. Green, and that Green name I think is going to hit my paternal line. But nonetheless, thank you guys so much.
We're in it with you.
Hmm?
We're in it with you. Thank you so much for all this work. It's great.
Thank you. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, Deborah.
Well.
See you guys. Talk
Have
to
a
you.
great day.
All right. My
Night.
daughter left me. She's still here.
I said have a great day. I was listening.
Night.
It was very informative.
Yes, I loved it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Delbert.
Have a great day, cousins.
Night, everybody.
Night.
Let me stop this recording.